Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A week until NFL teams can sign free agents. The new league year starts a week from today. Legalized tampering gets underway Monday. When you look at it, there are a number of free agent wide receivers that the Browns likely to be talking to. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik. Tim, one of the big names that kind of became available a little late, Amari Cooper. What are your thoughts? Is that a guy that the Browns are likely to have some interest in?
I think they should be looking at him. I mean, Cooper's put some pretty good numbers throughout his entire career. 7,000 plus yards between Oakland and Dallas. He's a four-time Pro Bowler. Hasn't had a double-digit touchdown season in his career, but he's been productive. You know, he's pretty reliable. I'm not sure if he's an elite guy, but he's plenty good enough to be a very high quality number two, a low end number one, just a productive guy who, when you get him on the field, he's got a chance to be impactful for you, to help your offense. And that's the kind of receiver the Browns could use, someone who's extremely dependable, but got some athletic burst to go along with it. So if the Browns can sign Amari Cooper, maybe he's not the number one guy to be spearheading the passing game, but if he could be a number two, then that would be absolutely tremendous for the Browns.
All right, let's look at some of the other guys, and we're not going to go all high end. So a guy like maybe DJ Chark, you look at him, and you know, 51 is the rank. These are Pro Football Focus ranks. 6'4", 4.3 speed, and the projected salary. Yeah, I kind of like that. Is this a guy that, you know, in the right situation, you think has some upside?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I'm looking at his numbers right now. Don't forget, in 2019, his second season playing with Blake Bortles as a quarterback by and large, 1,000 yards. He was a Pro Bowler in 2019. 2020, not quite as good, missed a few games. And then 2019, he was playing with Gardner Minshew. I beg your pardon, but 2020, solid numbers. 2021, only played 4 games and only had 7 catches, 154 yards. But this is a guy that, you know, has been pretty good in Jacksonville considering what's gone on at quarterback. But there's a lot to like with the athletic tools, that he's got some good production behind him. Maybe he's kind of a guy that can fly under the radar and be, you know, a solid signing still with some upside. I mean, you look at his age, he's only going to be 26 years old in late September. So there's age, there's upside, and there's some production. So that seems like a pretty good fit for the Andrew Berry drafting profile.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems like the kind of guys that Berry has targeted in the past. Another guy, and I think you like him. I know we've talked about him before, Christian Kirk. When you look at Christian Kirk, in a really crowded wide receiver room with the Arizona Cardinals, and again, you see the projection as far as what the cost might be. It's very interesting. Now, 5'11", 200, former second-round pick, 4.4 speed. So there is a guy that again, in the right situation, could flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an offense that included DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, and Rondale Moore. And so to be in that, you know, crowded group of receivers and still to put up pretty good numbers is pretty significant. I mean, now, if the Browns are signing Christian Kirk, I don't think he's a number one guy. I think he's a number two guy that you can move into the slot, which I think is more important than people realize. I mean, slot receivers are more important now than ever in, you know, a typical 3-receiver offense that you see more often around the league. You need slot guys who are going to win because they're going up against slot corners. The middle of the field is always a tricky place to defend in certain situations against the pass. So having a guy who can really control that part of the field is vital. And Kirk is, like I said, has put up solid numbers. He also has a pretty good history as a kick and punt returner, which is another thing the Browns need. So it's a guy who, while he may not be the focal point of your offense, he's a guy who can fill a couple roles for one roster spot, which is always a good thing to have.
And this guy will be familiar to Browns fans, and some of them won't want him simply because of who he is. Juju Smith-Schuster, and I'm not sure how much I like that one, but 1 year, $8 million. What are your thoughts on Juju Smith-Schuster?
Maybe on a cheaper deal it would be okay, but I don't know how I would feel about it for more than, you know, more, even that $8 million seems like a lot to me for Smith-Schuster. There was certainly, it seemed like there was going to be plenty of value for him, plenty of opportunities for free agency last year, but that just never came around. He came back to Pittsburgh, and only played 5 games before he suffered a season-ending injury. He's pretty much at this point of his career kind of a number 2, number 3 guy, solid, not necessarily spectacular. He can separate, he can win on one-on-ones, so that's good. But there's just the concerns that he was never able to really fully be a number 1 after Antonio Brown left. So there's that concern. I don't know if this is a guy I would really go for, to be honest with you. I think there's plenty of other options, and I think the history with Browns is the Browns might kind of be a little sore, and that might be a little sore subject if he's brought into that locker room.
Yeah, I could see that. Another name I'll throw at you, Emmanuel Sanders. That's a guy who has played in this system with the 49ers before he went to the Bills. Again, wouldn't be a number 1 guy, but again, you're looking to kind of rebuild that room. Does a guy like Sanders have some interest to you?
I think so, yeah. He's a good, consummate professional. He's got a Super Bowl ring. And everywhere he's gone, he's been pretty productive. Even in Buffalo, playing behind Stephon Diggs this past season, 626 yards, 4 touchdowns, as you can see on the screen. Veteran guy, he's got good speed. He's got a couple Pro Bowls in his back pocket. So this is just, a good, solid receiver. And it wouldn't be a bad guy to have, especially if you're going to bring in a rookie or two, through the draft, considering how deep this draft is a receiver. Have another guy in there, especially if you move on from Jarvis Landry, who's been around the league, who's done it, played in a bunch of systems, and can really be a good mentor while at the same time being pretty productive. There's a lot to like if the price is right with Emmanuel Sanders.
And to be clear, you and I have talked a number of times, this guy wouldn't be a number 1, he'd be a number 2. If they sign a guy that you view to be a number 2, they're likely to go wide receiver at 13 is our think. It's my thinking. Is that kind of the way you're thinking as well? I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Well, I'm with you right there. It wouldn't be a bad idea, I guess, considering, the finicky history of signing receivers in free agency to big deals, that maybe that's the option the Browns could go with, is sign a number 2 guy and then go draft your number 1, maybe even draft a 3 or a 4 developmental guy in the 3rd round or whatever, to really retool and rebuild that position room. Because I think, there's reasons some of these guys are going to be free agents. Unless you have like a super duper elite receiver, they have shorter shelf lives than you would think for the position. 30 is typically the age point where these guys kind of fall off a little bit. But for the Browns, if you can get a veteran number 2 guy, it can be very reliable, win some one-on-ones, and he can maybe even for a short time be the number 1 while whoever you draft at 13 or whatever develops behind him before he's ready to kind of take the reins. That would, I think, kind of would be the ideal scenario for the Browns.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue to take a look at free agents. We're going to head to the defensive line as free agency. Teams can sign free agents in just a week. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back talking D-line. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. New league year gets underway next week. Next Wednesday, teams can sign free agents. Talking free agency with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Tim, Browns free agent, defensive lineman Jameson Williams. Browns would like to have him back. He might have priced himself out of the Browns' price range with his play last year.
I definitely agree. I mean, if the Browns were able to bring him back, that'd be tremendous because we saw how well he played opposite Myles Garrett. It seemed like a perfect fit, especially, you know, considering Clowney was healthy and arguably one of his best seasons as a pro. I mean, combining Garrett's power and speed off the edge with the way Clowney was able to set the edge, play with power, and he also got into the backfield a pretty good amount of times too. You know, in a perfect world, the Browns find a way to keep him, but again, it comes down to money, as we all know, in the salary cap world. So, I mean, it's certainly a good possibility based on that alone that if Clowney's price tag doesn't come down or he doesn't try to give a hometown discount to stay in Cleveland, Browns might have to look elsewhere for that edge opposite Myles Garrett.
All right, so one of the names that has come up, Chandler Jones, and you look at Jones, probably a little on the aged side, a little older, which is a concern. Missed 3/4 of the season, bicep injury back in 2020. You see the pressures, double-digit sacks each of the past 6 years. He's played more than 300 snaps. If you can get him at 2 years and $16.5 million, yeah, you know, that's a little over $8 million. That's less than they ended up paying for Clowney. Again, older, as you get older on that, you know, the injury risk includes, but what are your thoughts on Chandler Jones?
I really like him. I mean, you know, he's gotten older, obviously, you know, just turned 32 a couple days ago. So he's on the wrong side of 30, but, you know, still productive in Arizona last year, 10.5 sacks. Of course, we know 5 of those came in that one game, but in 2019, also 19 sacks. So he's obviously been very productive. I think, you know, even though he's older, I still think he'd be a very good fit alongside Myles Garrett. Getting another top-level pass rusher to put opposite Myles, I think, is paramount for this offseason. However the Browns can do it, whether it's Chandler Jones or somebody in the draft, makes sense to me. And especially if you can get him on a 2-year deal where you can have an edge guy that you take in the second round of what's an extremely, extremely deep class at edge rusher. Have him kind of learn behind Jones for 2 years, maybe be a third guy, bring him in, you know, after Jones kind of leaves in 2 seasons. But I think as far as a veteran goes, you're not going to find many more proven guys as far as guys who can get to the quarterback than Chandler Jones. All
right, another Jones that we're going to talk about, DJ Jones, a free agent offensive lineman. And you see again, Pro Football Focus ranks 77. Quality campaign. They think he could be the most sought after interior defensive lineman. They're estimating 8.75 per year, 15.5 guaranteed. And again, the Browns need to fortify the interior defensive line, so that's an area of need.
Absolutely, and I think this is the need you probably have to fill in free agency because they've already drafted 2 young players in Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai. You know, neither of them have really kind of stepped up to this point, although they're both still very young. They still got a lot of time. I don't know if you could draft a guy. I think you got to bring in a guy, a veteran who can play right away. And you look at Jones's numbers, you know, last year's season's been really good. 17 tackles for a loss at the defensive tackle spot. He's got a unique frame at 6 foot, 305 pounds. I mean, he's a shorter guy, so he's a guy that's going to create some leverage. Hard to kind of move off because, you know, as we know in physics and football and blocking, lowest man wins. And it's hard to be lower than the guy who's 6 feet tall. So he's an interesting fit. Played really well alongside Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead in San Francisco. I think we talked about him a few weeks ago as kind of a sleeper option. I think, you know, this could be the kind of guy that Andrew Berry looks for. I mean, I look at his age. He just turned 27 back in January. Still got a few years of prime left. again, we talked about earlier with a guy like DJ Chark. This seems kind of in Andrew Berry's wheelhouse, a guy that's still kind of in his mid to late 20s, just getting into his later 20s, so he's still got a few years left, but still got a little upside to go. And I think if you put him on this Browns defensive line, maybe he could have a similar impact, because with Myles Garrett and whoever they add at defensive end on the other side can help take some pressure away from DJ Jones and let him do his thing and create some havoc in the interior.
All right, we're going to do one that the producers like to see how I'm going to produce. So it's Follow Run Show Fatou Kassi. And I got that right. That's the amazing part of it. So again, from the Jets, interior guy, they're saying 3 years, $8.33 million, $15 million guaranteed. Nice number of pressures. When you look at it, it's an area that you could see the Browns going with him in.
Yeah, and this was an interesting name when I was kind of doing some digging around for a defensive lineman that kind of stuck out. This was an interesting under the radar name that really came up. Then you look at his grades on Pro Football Focus, 2019, 2020, putting up run defense grades in the 80s, and that's absolutely sensational. And I think that's something the Browns could really use a defensive tackle, is a guy who can, be just a run stuffer. I don't know. You may not be a true pass rush guy, but I don't know if you need Fatou Kassi to be a pass rush guy. You just need a guy who's going to be there in first and second down to stuff the run, to really free things up, take on double teams, and really free things up for everybody else. Your speedy linebackers, your defensive backs, defensive line to make plays in the run game. Because we saw, especially against New England, how when they took the ends out of the equation in the run game, that New England just ran wild. If you have that guy in the interior who can clog things up, like Fatou Kassi certainly can, could be a nice way to really kind of continue to reshape that defensive line to get it to continue to evolve. And I think that's maybe the only thing that this Browns defense is missing, is that true run clogger in the middle.
All right, we're going to talk about some former Browns who are on the market as well. There's Larry Ogunjobi and Olivier Vernon. And remember, Olivier Vernon didn't play anywhere last year because of the Achilles. When you look at Ogunjobi and Vernon, Vernon would obviously be on an incentive-laden, probably lower-end contract. Any interest in either of those two?
Maybe. I think obviously with Vernon, just because a little familiarity in the defense, you want to learn a new playbook. And, him coming off the Achilles, maybe it's a situation where if he comes in cheaper, he's kind of a guy that you bet on with incentives. Maybe he would be a third guy, but I think to make that work, you would either have to bring a guy ahead of him, a more proven guy like a Chandler Jones or a Harold Landry to play that opposite edge spot, or draft a guy at 13, which would kind of take away from the issue they have at receiver. So that would be fully up, I think, to the medical staff as far as, how Vernon's progressed from his injury. As for Larry Ogunjobi, I mean, this was a guy who was certainly very good in his time in Cleveland, but I think, just with the way the cap kind of came down, priced him out, and he goes to Cincinnati, and he has a big impact on the team that goes to the Super Bowl. 12 tackles for loss last season. Very good in the interior. I always thought he was a very underrated player. That'd be a good fit. I think that'd be a good little fun reunion to bring him back if it's possible. It'll just kind of come down to how much the Bengals want to try and keep some of the band back together on that defense, because that front really got good in the final 2 months of the season, especially in the playoffs when they really turned it up a notch and helped, give Joe Burrow more opportunities to do his thing in the playoffs.
All right, Sheldon Richardson, that's one that will be familiar. Was a salary cap casualty a season ago with the Browns. You look at it, 1 year, $3 million, fully guaranteed. I might be willing to sign on for that, because that would be, to me, that seems awfully low risk. If Pro Football Focus has that contract kind of nailed, they liked him a lot when he was here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it comes down to the contract, as you see so many times, again, in a salary cap world, because we don't know what's going to happen with Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, Case Keenum, those contracts in particular. So if you can get a guy who's got value, I think like Richardson does, maybe at that price point, it works out well. I mean, you look at last season, played in all 17 games, didn't necessarily put up the best numbers, but he wasn't starting. He only started 7 times for Minnesota on that defense. So it'd be an interesting look. It just kind of depends how he feels coming back after, the whole thing with Cleveland. last offseason, how that didn't work out, how they didn't want to bring it back. It just kind of depends on kind of, can they, come together and, move forward and try this again. Because Richardson, I thought, was pretty good in his time with the Browns, and getting a veteran there, especially when you still have those youngsters and Elliott and Togia behind him, to let those guys continue to grow at their own pace instead of kind of throwing them into the fire. Any veteran too they can add, especially with some pretty good track records, not a bad bet.
All right, last name we'll throw at you, Emmanuel Ogbah, drafted by the Browns. And Andrew Berry was part of the front office that did it. And he is a guy they're projecting 3 years, $15.5 million. Pro Football Focus ranks him 22nd best free agency available. He played really well for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible development story for Emmanuel Ogbah. Goes to Miami, and a key reason why the Dolphins for the last 2 years had a pretty darn good defense, and Ogbah, a big reason behind it. 9 sacks each of the last 2 seasons. He's not an elite guy by any of this stretch, but he's a consummate professional, very solid. You know what you're getting from him. He's going to have good effort. And it really seemed like he took a step up in his career in Miami, and it'd be interesting to see if the Browns were able to bring him back. Would he be able to continue that? And obviously, again, not being the number 1 guy, being a number 2 opposite Myles Garrett will take a lot of pressure off whoever comes to Cleveland. Whoever basically coming here is going to be the number 2. And Ogbah's at least showed something in Miami. The question is, was it part of the Dolphins scheme, or did he really progress forward? I think that's something that kind of comes down to the tape and the evaluation when you're looking at a player like Ogbah. But there's no question, whether or not he comes to Cleveland or not, he's really taken a step forward in his career, and it's good to see from the young man.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll look at some potential trade targets for the Browns. We'll also talk at some of the diamonds in the rough, some under-the-radar prospects. Sports4CLE, talking NFL offseason and roster building. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. New league year right around the corner for the NFL. We continue talking roster building with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Andy Isabella, agent, gave him, the Cardinals gave his agent permission to seek a trade. Browns were interested in trading for him at the trade deadline a season ago. Again, he kind of caught in that crazy wide receiver room for the Cardinals. Probably wouldn't cost you much. Would you be willing to do a 6th, 7th round pick to bring Andy Isabella in?
Possibly. I mean, I think, you can't have too many speedy players in an offense. And I think Isabella, like you said, a guy that kind of got caught, in an Arizona room that there just wasn't many opportunities for him. I mean, 3 touchdowns, only about 400-plus yards in 3 seasons is clear in 2021. He just wasn't going to have much of a role after the Cardinals drafted Rondale Moore and signed A.J. Green and kind of made him the de facto 5th receiver, even the 6th, after they traded for Zach Ertz in the middle of the season. So I think he needs a fresh start. It'd be an interesting thing. There's always the fun local dynamic that is always interesting when we talk about the Browns, how many local players they can bring in. But Isabella's got speed to burn. He put up pretty good numbers at UMass. He's a guy that's at least worth investigating, at least kind of keeping an eye on, maybe a low-risk, high-reward trade, if you're able to bring him in. But he's interesting, no question about it. It's just a question of, from what you've seen what the Browns have seen in limited reps, limited opportunities, do they want to send a late round pick to Arizona for him, or do they want to see if he hits the market instead if the Cardinals decide to just release him?
All right. You wrote a column about diamonds in the rough. Take us through those, what you like about these guys, and do you think they fit with what the Browns want to do?
Well, I wrote 4 diamonds in the rough, so 1 for each day of the combine. We could take a look from what I had Saturday night, which was the defensive linebacker group, which was the best group of the week. And first up, as you see on the screen, Amari Barno from Virginia Tech. I mean, 246 pounds. The guy that runs a 4.36 40. I mean, you don't really have to say much else when you look at just that absolute pure speed that Barno has. I know 40-yard dashes in the end-all be-all for defensive ends. I mean, you're not asking those guys on the end to run to run 40 yards very often, but good explosiveness, good vertical ability, shuttle time pretty good. Got a relative athletic score on a scale of 1 to 10, about a 9.73. Would have liked to see the agility numbers, which is a complaint I kind of have about most of these guys at the combine, is a lot of them didn't do the 3-code, which really I think is a bigger tell-all for success than the 40 is. But, Barno seems like a very interesting late round, like a day 3, maybe 4th round flyer that sticks out. I mean, again, 4.36 40 for a defensive end. There has not been a defensive end that has ever run that. That's just sensational. Speaks to his athleticism. If I look at defensive tackles, I'm going to go to Stanford for Thomas Booker. Now, this was a guy who very athletic as well. I mean, you're not looking at defensive tackles who run the 40, but sort of 5 seconds, pretty good size. The agility numbers stick out for a guy that size. A 20-yard shuttle of 4.41 seconds, a 3-cone of 7.33. He's a guy that could sneak into that, certainly also be a late day 2, early day 3 guy, relative athletic score of almost 10. And, we've talked about defensive tackle being in need. Maybe it's not one they target early, especially if they go out and get a guy or 2 in free agency. But if they want to keep stocking that room up, get another athletic prospect like Thomas Booker to fill that 3rd role. And number 3 for me, I'm going to go to the SEC. Chance Campbell, the linebacker from Ole Miss, is a guy that there's some, draft sites that you look at. Some of them have him, at the back end of the entire draft, like the Draft Network 210, that would be in the 7th round. Draft Tech has him 312. That's all the way, UDFA level. But what Campbell showed is that he can move pretty well. The sub 4.6 40, broad jump's very good, as you can see, 10 feet 7 inches, 6th among linebackers on the vertical, 39.5 inches. Tells you he's got speed and he's got explosiveness. He's one of those guys, I think, that, what he did on Saturday night, he needed to do well to earn himself, to really boost his chance getting drafted. Seems like a guy who could certainly do that. Maybe early in his career, he's a guy that you put out there on special teams, that he's one of those gunners that you got on punt team or whatever to go get the return men, try and bring him down. This is a guy that could certainly do that early on in his career. Maybe as you continue to refine him, certainly a guy that maybe you can fit into a sub package someday. But for a late round flyer, especially if you want to fill out your special teams coverage units, this is an interesting player to check out.
Tim Bielik and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the wide receiver group, the higher end of it. Sports4CLE will be right back.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Combine wrapped up last week. We're going to sit here and take a look at some of the top wide receivers with Tim Bielik. We're going to start out Ohio State's Garrett Wilson. Wilson projected by some to be the Browns' pick at 13 in the mock drafts. You see the size, the arms, good hands, decent weight size. You take a look at the scouting report, and he's got a polished game and high upside. There is a lot to like about Garrett Wilson, and some have him projected as the top wide receiver coming off the board in this draft. He also went to the same high school as Baker Mayfield. He and Baker Mayfield know each other, and Wilson would definitely welcome the chance to be reunited with the Browns' Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, for sure. Baker's my guy. He was always a little older than me, and he would come back and coach 7-on-7, and during the quarantine, we actually threw together a couple times, and so I know that Baker's a great player, and we have a good relationship. did have a formal with the Browns, and it would be great to link up with Baker. Baker's someone that like I said, did all the things that I wanted to do. Being a Heisman winner, that stuff you can only dream about. So watching him ball when I was younger, that was really awesome. And having that opportunity to maybe have that happen again would be awesome.
And Tim Bielik, when you think about it, if you can make Baker Mayfield more comfortable, put guys around him that are excited to be around him, that's a good thing for the Browns.
No question about it. I mean, Garrett Wilson, I think this past weekend in Indianapolis certainly cemented himself as the #1 receiver in this class. The sub had a really good 40 time, tested very well. I'm looking at the numbers of 4.38. Very good. We know his separation ability is tremendous. His body control is tremendous. Hands are very good. I think the only concern for the Browns is he may not be there at number 13. I think that's starting to become, a growing thing. Is like, did he do too well at the combine? Did he test too well in those areas? Is he going to not be there? Will a team like the Giants take him, or the Falcons, or the Jets, someone from 7, 8, or 10, for example, take him and not have him there for the Browns? And I mean, we know about the history of Ohio State receivers. Some of those guys have gone on to do very well. I think Wilson certainly has #1 potential. He may not have prototypical #1 size, but he plays better than that because of his leaping ability. Like I said, his body control, and he's also very good after the catch. So there's a lot of completeness to his game that really sticks out. And the Baker Mayfield, Lake Travis connection is just a nice little bonus on top of that.
All right, another guy that could be there and could be on the Browns' radar, Treylon Burks. You see the size, 6'2", 225, and the hands, pretty big hands, arms big as well. You look at Burks and you take a look at the scouting report for him, and A.J. Brown with more wiggle is the comp to him for the NFL. High volume, 3-level target, can start and produce in his rookie season. Burks has no doubt that he's going to be doing what needs to be done, and welcomes the comparisons to the elite NFL receivers.
Watched a lot of Deebo Samuel just by the way that he plays running back, plays inside, plays outside, multiplayer person, athlete, and that's what I try to mimic my game after.
And everybody's trying to find the next Deebo Samuel, and if you're Deebo Samuel, the Browns would be very happy with that in Treylon Burks.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw, the second half of the season, even the playoffs, just how special Deebo Samuel can be. And I mean, that's like the other comparison. It's either maybe a faster A.J. Brown or a bigger Deebo Samuel with Treylon Burks. Now, Burks really didn't test as well at the combine as I think everybody expected. His 3-cone time wasn't particularly spectacular. His 7.28, which, considering, all the things you hear about him, stuff like him, what I've said, being a walking mismatch, so speed's still pretty good. Size is very good. It could hurt him a little bit, but I don't think as much as people want to. I mean, as much as we talk about, how players perform in the combine, we also have to remember that it's a small piece of the puzzle. The film is what matters the most. And what you see on film is a guy that against the SEC defenses was extremely productive. Teams game plan to stop him, and they still really couldn't do it, which tells you plenty about Treylon Burks. And as far as the testing, maybe he just didn't have his best day. And that certainly happens. Sometimes you just don't have a great day of testing. We'll have to see maybe he does it again at his pro day, improves on those numbers, and then that kind of alleviates some concerns. But maybe Burks has taken a little bit of a hit, but it could also be because, who else performed very well, which we'll talk about a little later.
All right, Drake London from Southern Cal, another guy that is thought to be one of the top targets. You see the size, 6'4", 219, a big red zone target. You look at the scouting report, the comps, Ed McCaffrey, pretty good wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. 50-50 balls. I like that line. He turns 50-50 balls into a 70-30 advantage. That tells you he's really good at the point of attack and in contested balls. Drake London sees some comps to a guy that's been really successful in Mike Evans for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I had people like Amara, Pitt, and Tyler Vaughns, and I was able to take things from them. And then also a coach like Coach KC, who's also a great at SC. So definitely guys like those who I can attribute my game after. And then also people like Mike Evans, just a guy who's similarly built as me, and I could take his fluidity from his game, being that he's been in the league so long and things that he knows. So definitely somebody like him.
So we could pencil you in for 1,000 every season like Mike Evans does?
Yeah, I'm trying to shoot for that. Like you said, my mentors, like Pitt and them, I could always just call them up and ask them, hey, how does this work? How'd you do good at this? And how'd you get accustomed to certain things? So I definitely have good people in my back pocket, and I'm just excited for the future.
And Pitt, that he refers to as Michael Pittman, the Colts wide receiver. Drake London, again, an intriguing red zone target that, again, the question is, what do the Browns want? What type of receiver?
Yeah, that's going to be the million-dollar question. I've contended that, I think what Baker Mayfield could really use is a very tall receiver, a guy that's easier for him to spot. Obviously, Baker being shorter, you want a guy who's tall, that it's easier to see. And I think with Drake London, the appeal to me is a guy that moves. For a guy who's 6'4", 6'5", he's a guy who moves like he's 6'1", 6'2". What I mean by that, he's got more, agility than you expect from a guy of his size. He's more fluid than you expect from a guy of his size, and that's a bonus. Plus we talk about, the age thing. That's an underrated thing when it comes to players the Browns have targeted. They haven't drafted a player who's older than 22. Drake London, out of the top 5 receivers, is the youngest of the 5. I think he's not even supposed to turn 21 until July. So that's a nice little bonus for any of the Drake London fans out there who want to go to the Browns. But obviously him recovering from his injury, he didn't test at the combine, which is, as much as you understand, I would have kind of loved to see what he could have done in the 3-cone. I think it would have been very fascinating to see how that stood out, how that compared to smaller receivers, because I think that would be a really interesting metric to really see, because I think that's an underrated part of his game, something that, again, 6'4", 6'5" guys aren't supposed to be able to do. And there's also a basketball background to Drake London's game that we've seen players like Antonio Gates and Jimmy Graham have coming into the NFL to make them successful. Not to say Drake London is going to be as good as Antonio Gates and Jimmy Graham, but it could certainly help, and it's a good tool to have in a 50-50 jump ball battle. And I think there's a lot to love about Drake London's game. I know he didn't work out this past weekend, but in the last week for me, I think his stock has gone up a little with me, just thinking about it a little more.
All right, another Ohio State guy, Chris Olave. And Olave had a really nice combine. You see the 6 foot, 187, not a huge target. You look at the scouting report for Olave. Terry McLaurin, another Ohio State receiver, is the comp. Field stretcher, the ability to take on a sizable catch load, inside-outside hybrid that's appealing to defenses now. The other thing, the Browns have talked to him. They did talk to him at the combine. He'd love to come to Cleveland.
I'm meeting with them, I think on Monday, but it's a huge organization. I definitely like the way they run that, and just to stay in the state of Ohio. I know the fan base is crazy, and one of the best fan bases, and I definitely would love that and enjoy that. Oh yeah, when you go to a place like Ohio State, we're gonna have a lot of talent around you. It's only one ball to get around, so at the end of the day, I just want to win. As long as we're winning, we're all selfless in that receiver room. We have so many guys, so many talented guys, and especially this year, we had 3 guys go over 100 multiple games. So just being competitive and trying to get better every day alongside those guys, and then whatever happens on game day happens. As long as we win, I'm good.
Veteran move by Olave to play to the fan base, especially of the Browns. But again, he's a guy that, if you're telling me he's Terry McLaurin, sure, I'll sign up for that.
I mean, who wouldn't if you're a Browns fan, especially considering, McLaurin really outperformed his collegiate career very quickly at Ohio State. But I look at Chris Olave. He's one of the players to me that really won the combine. Because I mean, the 40, I know it wasn't a 4.26 or whatever, like the unofficial time was. If that was a 4.26, he would have probably jumped maybe even up out of the Browns range. But a sub 4.4, very good time for him. He's a very smooth player. I love how he separates. He's a very technical route runner, able to get open, yards after the catch. You know, I don't know if he's going to wow anybody with the flash plays that Garrett Wilson has, but again, Olave is just solid. You know, certainly has a pretty high floor as a player, I think. Maybe I don't know if it'd be worth it at 13 right now, but if the Browns took him at 13, it would certainly make a lot of sense. There's production, there's talent, there's upside, there's athleticism. There's a lot to like in Chris Olave. And, you know, he's still very underrated. I think when you look at this quintet of receivers, those top 5 guys, he's still very underrated.
All right, so one of the most intriguing ones we're going to look at, wide receiver Jameson Williams, tore his ACL in the national championship game. You see the height, 6'1.5", 179 pounds. You look at the scouting report. Will Fuller is a comp. The ACL tear could end up determining ultimately his draft destination. The question was put to Jameson Williams if he thought that injury kind of hurt his draft stock.
I'm not sure what it did to my draft stock. I hope it didn't hurt it, but hopefully a team still takes a shot at me and drafts me. I know how to read defenses and get through certain defenses and things like that, really just knowing the game and showing that I know it, really. I got speed that you can't teach. I got a lot of speed.
Has speed that you can't teach. You know what? He's not going to get out of the first round. And if he falls to the bottom half of the first round, a team that's really good, that was in the playoffs, is going to get a really good wide receiver that they might have to wait a little bit for.
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot for him, is a team that's already pretty good at receiver, that, you know, they don't need him on day one. That's where I think, unfortunately for Williams and the Browns, it's not a good fit, because the Browns need a guy who could play immediately at the position. We don't know exactly when Williams can come back. I mean, you're talking 9 months out from the injury. That would put him in October. That's the usual ACL recovery, is 6 to 9 months. On the shorter end, then if you got him for training camp, that'd be just tremendous for whoever takes him. The only way I would see it make sense really for the Browns is if they've already invested and got like a Calvin Ridley guy, you know, if they traded for him or signed a really good veteran, like if they were able to get Amari Cooper, they were able to get Mike Williams or even Chris Godwin, if the Buccaneers don't franchise tag him, you know, one of those situations would be the only way I look at it, is if you can buy yourself a little time while Williams kind of works his way back from the ACL. And he's a guy that, as talented as he's going to be, you're going to have to wait a little bit for him, because we saw, you know, to a lesser extent, Anthony Schwartz, you know, struggle when he missed most of training camp and the injury. Granted, I think he was a guy that, you know, we weren't going to see much of in 2021 anyway, just because I thought he was more raw. We really only saw him specifically on deep routes and jet sweeps, which is kind of what I was expecting. But certainly I thought maybe the injury in training camp hurt him a little bit. And when you miss time in your first training camp, naturally is going to set you back as a rookie. So I think whoever's drafting Jameson Williams going to have to look a little bit to the future before you can start to kind of reap the rewards of the pick.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the defensive linemen from the Combine. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
We continue talking draft prospects for the NFL. Tim Bielik and I from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. George Karlaftis is a guy from Purdue, edge rusher, who has been on the Browns' radar in some mock drafts. And here you see him, 6'4", 275. You take a look at the scouting report. Good power, relentless motor, keeps the heat on his offensive counterparts throughout the day. Best production 2019, he missed half of Purdue's 2020 season. The guy is a high motor guy, and when you talk to George Karlaftis, that's how he plays the game.
Relentless, right? that's how I approach life, how I approach the game, in terms of my technique, in terms of how I play, my motor, my effort, everything about it, relentless. I think I compare myself to Khalil Mack. He has that speed to power, so I see a lot of similarity between our games. A little different body types, but I think same way we approach the game. I like to watch T.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, Ryan Kerrigan. I mean, the list goes on, but yeah.
And Tim Bielik, if you tell me I'm getting any of the guys he mentioned, 13, sign me up for it.
Yeah, I think edge rusher would really be the only position I would consider outside of receiver and maybe even Malik Willis at 13. And if it's Karlaftis that's still there, I would have to think really hard and long about whether or not to pass on receiver and take George Karlaftis. I think he's that good. You know, he came into Purdue, was outstanding right away as a true freshman. You know, in 2021, numbers weren't necessarily there, but again, teams were really game planning to slow him down. That's kind of the Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa effect that happened at Ohio State, you know, in their later years when teams were double teaming, even triple teaming them at times, trying to make someone else beat them. That's kind of what happened with George Karlaftis in his last season at Purdue. And I mean, you look at Purdue's recent history, you know, going back, you know, a decade and a half or so, they've, you know, Ryan Kerrigan, Quan Short, both of those guys, tremendous defensive linemen. You know, they're very disruptive players. If Karlaftis could be on the level of Ryan Kerrigan and Quan Short, you know, he's worth a pick at 13 if the Browns decide they'd rather go get that edge guy who can be opposite Myles Garrett for the next 5 to 10 years. He's got tremendous power, and I think he really has athletic tools that complement Myles Garrett's game very well.
Another guy from the Combine who showed up pretty well, Devontae Wyatt from Georgia. And there were a number of Georgia guys. You see 6'3", 307 pounds for the defensive tackle. Scouting report, they have him comped as Malik Collins. High active defensive tackle, decent strength, is made for movement and disruptions. Helped himself with better tape against the run and as a pass rusher. And when you have movements and disruptions, that's a pretty good thing. Here's Wyatt talking about how he can help an NFL team.
I definitely can fit in any defense in the NFL. When I'm trying to show them, I'm just trying to show them like, oh, he can move. This guy right here is crazy. Like, I want the eye to be like this. So definitely that's something I want to show off.
And yeah, there's a couple of guys like that on that Georgia defense. But when you're that big and you move like that, you want that guy on your defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, that's the theme. You know, you're going to look at with these Georgia defensive prospects. They're incredibly athletic, and there's a lot of good ones. I mean, there's a reason a lot of people considered it one of the best defenses we've seen in college football in the last several decades, and Wyatt certainly plays a huge part in that. How much of a part everybody plays is kind of be interesting, kind of see how that all plays out when they all kind of go their separate ways. But Wyatt's certainly a very interesting player, tested extremely well. You know, if the Browns were to be able to get him in the second round, I think he'd be a tremendous fit, a tremendous disruptor in the middle, power, you know, could play well against the run. I think the negative for him and what could ultimately be the red flag that keeps us out of Cleveland, he's 24 years old, and that's pretty old for a draft prospect. Again, going back to what I was saying before about how Andrew Berry has never drafted a guy who's older than 22 at the time of the draft. Now, this is an older draft class. I'm going to say that right now. Obviously, with the pandemic, a lot more super seniors in this class. This is an older class, so maybe he bends the rules a bit, especially if a player like Wyatt is there for him. Because if the Browns take him, they're going to get a very good disruptive player in the middle. And, you know, that I could argue is almost as big a need as having, you know, a consistent guy opposite Myles Garrett. Because if you can have both those things, you can really take this defensive line to another level, even with the attention teams are putting on Myles Garrett. Because if you have two other guys on that line who can be productive, it would be a real pick your poison type of situation, kind of like what we saw with Garrett and Clowney last season.
All right, another one of those Georgia guys on the line, Travon Walker. And you look at Walker, 6'5", 275, so a big defensive end. Chris Wormley is the comp. Effective against the run, but likely a one-way player who comes off the field on passing downs. Walker has been working hard to improve his pass rushing ability.
Projections I really don't pay too much of. I'm one of those guys just keep my head down, keep doing what I've been doing, not let all the outside hype get to me. To set the edge, you have to be one of those hard-nosed guys and not just want to pass rush all the time. Just make a statement and let it be known that you can set the edge and play the run as well.
And again, he's talking about playing the run and an interesting guy in Walker, just the size for a D end like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare to see a guy that big, that strong at, defensive end. And again, I think run stopping is kind of an underrated part of a defensive end's game. And you saw that a year ago with Jadeveon Clowney, just how good he was at setting the edge, how tough it was for teams to run past him, how much he kind of held his ground there, and just how effective he was at defending the run. It's a big reason the Browns had one of the better run defenses in the NFL. And with Travon Walker, if the Browns would have drafted him, certainly have that, ability there to do that, but you also got to be able to have some ability to rush the passer, But I kind of have to see how Walker develops with that, but certainly got all the attributes you're looking at when it comes to a guy who can maybe develop those tools. Still a younger player. Again, athleticism like crazy, like several of these other Georgia guys that we've talked about. He's an intriguing guy, and certainly I think he's kind of like penned himself into that first half of the first round, I think. He's a very toolsy guy, and it's going to be fun to see kind of how he fits and how he grows depending on where he goes.
Well, the talk of the combine was another one of the Georgia defensive lineman, Jordan Davis. And Davis, 6'6", 341 pounds, mammoth, 10 and 3/4 inch hands. You look at the comp, Ted Washington, beefy, mountainous, nose tackle size, power. Will clog the drain and offenses can't run against him. Could become one of the league's best run pluggers as soon as he takes the field. And the thing that kind of opened everybody's eyes was his 40-yard time. He took off and was outstanding running the 40. And again, he's working on his pass rush as well.
Everybody knows, I'm a run stopper, and pass rush kind of goes by the wayside with me. But definitely in the off season, that's something I've been working on. I called on, a few people working out with Chuck Smith, who's known as Dr. Pass Rush. So that's just one of those people. I feel myself when I have a disadvantage, I want to make sure that I kind of even the odds and bring that up to the same level. It's just all working about improvement. This is what it's all about in the off season. You want to improve and get better, and I definitely think that I'm doing that.
Can you imagine if that guy becomes a pass rusher? Quarterbacks around the NFL are not looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, I had to rewatch that 3 or 4 times to make sure that wasn't, digitally altered, that, some digital effects artist didn't come in and speed up the footage there on Jordan Davis. But, I mean, guys that big should not be able to move as well as Jordan Davis did, and that's absolutely phenomenal phenomenal workout for Jordan Davis. I mean, he was the linchpin of that Georgia defense. He was the guy who really ate everything up and made it possible for guys like Devontae White, Travon Walker, Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, you name it, Lewis Seen, all those guys to go around and make plays because he was taking up so much traffic in the middle. And I thought it was interesting, him talking about how he wants to diversify his game. He knows right now he's kind of mainly a run-stopping guy, and I think if you're going to draft him, you have to know that's the kind of the role you have to create for him, is you're drafting him to be a two-down player right now who can immediately just improve a run defense right from day one. That's when you're drafting a Jordan Davis for. If the pass rush comes in a year or two, that's fantastic because, I mean, we saw he's got faster 40 than Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, Jameis Winston, to name a few. But I think that's just going to be developed. That's just going to be something that has to develop over time. You're getting a guy like Jordan Davis because he can plug up the run as well as he does.
All right, last guy we're going to look at is Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. Was the talk of the Senior Bowl, 6'4", 259, edge rusher. And you look at the scouting report on him. Max Crosby is the comp to him, who has really come on for the Las Vegas Raiders. Has the traits, athleticism, and talent to project high in the draft. Strength and athleticism should make him firm edge setter and playmaker near the line of scrimmage. He also has the kind of mindset that defensive coaches are going to love. Here's what he thinks he is as the type of player.
vicious. I'm physical. I will be on you the entire game. I play 90 like I play the first play of the game, and you guys, I mean, you look at my film and that's pretty evident. I don't give up, and I remind myself that I am the best player on that football field. I think I'm the best player on the field at all times, and good things tend to happen, especially when you can back it up. So I think I can back it up, and I'm excited to get to the next level and do it there.
And again, you love all that you hear about that. He is a guy who probably started in the second round, and I don't think there's any way he makes it into the second round at this point in time. He's probably top 15.
Yeah, clear first round guy. I mean, just the numbers itself stick out. I mean, transferring to Florida State from Georgia, by the way. You know, could you have imagined Jermaine adding that Georgia defense as good as it already was last year, having Jermaine Johnson on it, who, by the way, in 2020 had 5 sacks in 7 games, goes to Florida State, 11.5 sacks, 17.5 tackles for loss, an absolute force for the Seminoles, proving that, you know, he could stand out on his own, that, you know, as good a team as he had around him at Georgia, he showed at Florida State that he could be productive as well in his own right. I think that was important, you know. Athletically, he ran very well in the 40. Didn't do the agility drills, but good explosiveness. Another one of those older players, I think, but, you know, teams will bank on production. Teams will look at, you know, if he's productive while still kind of learning moves and different things like that, what's he going to be when we teach him those moves? What's he going to be like when he's starting to understand how teams are going to block him, where the double teams are coming from, when he can really digest what's in front of him? That's kind of what makes a player like him very attractive. Is he's got production now while he's still unrefined. What happens when you sharpen his game, when you make him more precise, and when everything is more clear and more ready to go? That's gonna be a fascinating development. I think maybe he's a little too old for the Browns, considering, like I said again, you know, the guardrail of age. But he's a guy who certainly made himself a lot of money by his decision to go to Florida State. It clearly paid tremendous dividends for him.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, Tim, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Tim Bielik, make sure you read on pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We are going to talk to the head football coach from Western Michigan, Tim Lester. His guy, Skyy Moore, rising up the draft boards with his performance at the Combine. Tim Lester, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We continue to talk about draft prospects and guys that really flew up the draft board potentially with their performance at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis this past weekend. One guy is a familiar guy to Mid-American Conference folks. Skyy Moore from Western Michigan probably did as much as anybody to help his draft stock. Let's welcome in the head coach of the Western Michigan Broncos, Tim Lester. Tim, as always, appreciate the time. How cool is it from a college coach's perspective to watch somebody that played in your program to go out and kind of light it up on a national stage like that at the Combine?
Well, it's super exciting for Skyy, first off, and it's exciting for our school, our league. We really felt confident he was going to do that. It's just exciting for everyone to get to see something we've already known for a long time, which is how special of a player he is. We've seen it during Maction. We've seen it for a couple of years now, and now everyone else is starting to realize the truth.
Look at the scouting reports. This is from the NFL eyes, what they saw with Skyy Moore. And again, 5'10", $195. You see the arms, the hands, which they make a big deal about for quarterbacks. It's pretty important for a wide receiver too. And then you get into the nuts and bolts of the strengths. consistently productive all 3 seasons. Good overall pace, ability to tilt coverage with his press release, efficient footwork, snaps off his routes, creates space with route leverage, quick snap to eyes of the quarterback in his break, squares to the throw, secures catches through contact. As a guy who saw him for 3 years and knows him, pretty accurate with that?
100%. I mean, and he got better every year. You know what I mean? I tell people all the time, he has been a pro since he's been here. He's probably the most impressive freshman I've ever seen in that he went about his business, had fun doing it, worked hard. I mean, we gave him number 24. I mean, he was a true freshman. We didn't know if he's going to play DB or wideout. We put him at 24. He never changed his number. He didn't care. He's like, Coach, 24 is my number. I'm gonna make 24 a good number. And it speaks to the type of person he is and his work ethic. And I think he's going to have a huge amount of success at the next level.
What areas do you want to see him get even better in, do you think, as you look at him? And football coaches are always asking all of their players, you're really good, but let's get better at this.
Every single time he came into my office, that was his first question is, Coach, what do I need to get better at? I mean, he led off with it, you know, like, Coach, what do I need to do? And a big thing last year was speed, overall top end speed. He was quick. He's 195. He's powerful. He was great off the jam. That was between his first and second year. I said, hey, we need to work at the line of scrimmage, and bam, he did it. And then between year 2 and year 3, it was like, hey, you know, when these scouts look at you, we're going to have to get that top end speed going. I know you can go from 0 to 100 quick, but will you be able to produce that time? At that point, he was producing low 4.5, maybe a high 4.4. But I said, really, we need to get you to have more explosive plays. He's definitely a guy you want on third down with people draped all over him, throw it in his area, he'll get it. But our big thing going into this year was splash plays, pull away from people. And he went to the lab and did what he always does and had a ton of huge splash plays, big long gains that he hadn't really had in his first 2 years. And so I really think the biggest thing at that level is just going to be understanding some of those option routes and how to be patient. He's been getting better and better at option routes because he's one guy that we allow to do that because it is really a tough route to run. You got to be a special athlete to do it. And, so I think that's something he's going to have to continue to get better at. He already is on pace to do that. But I just think there's a lot of things like Cooper Kupp is a guy that I watch. He's willing to block. He plays in the slot. He's fast enough to play outside, but he really is at home in the slot. And I think for whatever team Skyy ends up on, I think he could be that type of player with some versatility in where you put him.
What type of kid is he? And what do you, as a coach who's had him in your program for 3 years, somebody that's that talented, appreciate most about him?
I just think that working with him, I mean, like I said, he was a pro since the day he got here. We brought him in as a true freshman. We were going to play him at corner. We needed more help on offense, so we put him on offense. We started him to the field, and he learned it in 2 seconds. So we put him in the slot, which is a little bit more complicated position, and he learned that. And then we moved him into the boundary, which is kind of the featured position, and he learned that. And he did that all in his first training camp at 18 years old. And never complained, always wanted to be coached. I love telling the numbers story just because it's amazing to have a kid that could care less what number he is. He just wants to show up and get better and play. And he truly has been a pro. And I think that's the thing that's going to help him at the next level is he's just fun to coach, fun to be around. I mean, never too high, never too low. Just the same guy. We talked about being an everyday guy. There aren't a ton of them out there. You love everyday guys, and he truly is remarkable with just showing up hungry every single day.
Another guy that played for you last year, the quarterback, Kaleb Eleby, he's another guy that people are looking at as a potential developmental quarterback. Let's take a look at Kaleb, and when you see it, you know, the size, 6'1", 208, he's got, you know, the 9 1/4 hand size. It's Baker Mayfield kind of hand size. You are a former college quarterback. What stands out about Kaleb Eleby as a developmental type guy at the NFL level?
Yeah, I think the arm strength. I mean, that's not his arm is not normal. I've coached. I'm a quarterback coach by trade. He has an unbelievable arm. I mean, better than any quarterback I've ever coached. He can make every throw. I mean, to go practice after practice after practice after practice and the ball not touching the ground for an entire practice. His accuracy and arm talent is unlike anything I've seen. So it's been fun to watch him just be so special at something, you know, and he needs to work. He needs time. He needs a drop back, read coverage, adjust protections. I mean, a lot of things that he's going to have to learn at the next level. But the moment he decides where he's going with it and he breaks his hands, you're going to be happy with what you see, because he can flat out spin it.
And you kind of touched on it. What are some of the things that an NFL team is going to work with him on to kind of improve and get where he needs to go? Again, he'd be a developmental guy, somebody you bring in and you teach him and you show him the ropes and you get him in your system.
Yeah, the top end, like you said, I mean, the top end is off the charts arm-wise. You know, the arm talent is there, the arm strength, the touch, the accuracy. You can watch him play. When we played Pitt this year, some of those throws in tight windows were NFL-type windows throws, which you either have or you don't. You know, the biggest part of him is going to be a drop-back game. We're a big RPO team. We didn't drop back a ton. So just the seeing the multiple coverages, moving underneath defenders, anticipating windows, those are the things that, you know, really even the great college quarterbacks need to be ready for at the next level. You're going to see split coverage and bracketed coverage, and the coverage structure you're going to see is going to be at a whole new level than what he's seen here. And being able to have to figure out what they're in, figure out how to protect yourself and get the ball to the right place is something that he's going to have to work on. And no matter where he goes, he's going to have to work on that. And the thing is, once he figures that out, he can get it there. There's no doubt about that. So that's going to be his biggest hurdle, that he's going to have to go in and get it in the playbook. And, you know, NFL, he's got to spit out the long plays and understand what his reads are and then go to work.
All right, before I let you go, what type of kid is Kaleb? And also, again, I keep going back to it. You were a quarterback. What do you appreciate about Kaleb under center?
Well, I think the biggest thing off the field would be his leadership capabilities. Such a unique young man. I remember being in his living room in St. Louis and watching him address his little brother, and he got down on a knee and he was talking to him. His brother was upset about something. I forget what it was. And just watching the way he communicated, I remember leaning over to my then offensive coordinator and said, hey, we might have a special one here. And from the moment he stepped in the building, every single day, he was talking to everybody. I mean, even when he wasn't the starter, he was friends with the O linemen. He was friends with the D linemen, the DBs, the linebackers. He has such a way about him of bringing people together. You know, so this team, you know, and any team I think that he's on is going to play for him. You know, that's an ability, communicating and connecting with people. And when you're out there and you're connected with all those guys you're out there with, it's amazing what people around you will do and how hard they will play for you. And I think that's something that's super unique about him, that once he gets into a locker room and once people see him, I think they'll be impressed.
Tim Lester, head football coach for Western Michigan University. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Look forward to seeing you and the Broncos in some action next season. Thanks so much, Tim.
It's coming. I appreciate you having me.
All right, Tim Lester, head football coach of Western Michigan. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody.